Beginning our Daf Pesachim Daf Kov Test, begin 10 lines down at the top of the Yomim. The Gemara continues the discussion with the previous stuff, which we said that look, everyone's happy with what they're happy with. Don't they have this famous thing about the love languages. Don't give other people your love language. You love touch. And then they're like, give me gifts. That's what I would like. So see, like we just mentioned before regarding the machlekes, regarding kids, you give them down cases. Give them snacks, give them things that they enjoy. So we have a similar discussion regarding the mitzvah of Simchas Yom Tov. Joining us for today's daf. Some of the discussing today's daf are the mitzvah of Simchas Yom Tov, regarding the measurement of a revis, which is the amount of wine necessary for each of the dal kais. What is exactly the measurement of a revis that we mentioned in the previous daf? And also, how did your Rabbanan make the dal kaises, which actually is what's called zugais, which are peers, which are not supposed to have even numbers because it can bring to danger. So in the key terms of concept discussing today's daf are ain't simcha l'basar. The only joy is, and those who go on vacation know there's got to be good meat over there, or else is no simcha. Yam Shas Shloime is the pool, the swimming pool that Shloime Melech made in the Azor of the Beis Hamikdash. Not swimming pool, I'm saying, but that was the big pool that he made. Actually, it was a swimming pool, but there was a big mikveh that they made. And zugais are the halacha that peers are danger in regards to shadim, and in regards to kishuv, in regards to sorcery. So we get the current daf. 10 lines down the Talmud. It says the Gemara term or the brisa. A person has an obligation to make his family. This is where the famous Chalamite trip comes from. The infamous, also I guess, Chalamite trip, which is more crying than there is smiles. But when you see it years later, you see all the smiles when you take the snapshot. So you're happy that you did it. That you have an obligation to make your wife, your kids happy on the Yom Tov. Now, where's the source from? It says in the Devarim, Samachta b'chagecha, that you should be happy on your Yom Tov. Which actually the discussion takes like what's the appropriate pasuk over here? It should really be a different pasuk, whatever. But it says in the pasuk you have to make your family happy. Now, how do you make them happy? So it's a machlekes. Now the comment says again, b'yayin, with wine. Rabbi says, and he said the same idea regarding the Seder night. He says, what do you mean? You don't do everyone one big, not everyone's the same way. Women and kids drinking wine is not going to be the same as a guy sitting down with a nice bottle of wine. It says, Anoshim b'roilem, men, what's appropriate for them, Anoshim b'roilem, and the women's appropriate for them. That's it. Men go to that they go to the courtroom, they have their time, and the women, they go on their own trips, they do their own thing. Anoshim b'roilem, the men that's appropriate for them is b'yayin, with wine. But Anoshim b'mai, what makes women happy? So Tanur Rebisa taught the Brisa. In Bavel was the big ditzavainen, was colorful garments and a nice colorful clothing you buy your wife for Yom Tov. Eretz Yisrael is the big day pishtim ugohatzin. Eretz Yisrael, these finely pressed linen garments, which actually Taisa says, Bavel, they weren't so proficient at this art of the finely pressed linen garments. As the Gemara says in Tainus, that their giyutz is like our laundering. They were better at it. So therefore, in Eretz Yisrael, they have the zad and for the flow and these nice linen garments. But in Bavel, they had these colorful designer clothing. But again, it has to be everyone according to what makes them happy. Bryce he says Bizman Shabbos coming the Beis Hamikdash was around in Simcha l'Basar. The Simcha was only with that of meat, and which Rashi elsewhere says it's actually the meat of the shlam. Shlam, like it says in the pasuk in the barn. You should slaughter the shlam and eat over there. And you'll rejoice with the Hashem your God. So it's only with meat that would actually bring the Simcha, and according to many, the meat of the shlam. Now, there's no Beis Hamikdash around in Simcha l'Bayayin. There's no joy for Yom Tov only with wine. Like I said, the pasuk tell me, that wine rejoices the hearts of men. So therefore, if you want to have Simchas Yom Tov, it has to be with that of wine. Now the Gemara goes back to explain. Now, how do we evaluate the revius that we said for the cases of the dal cases, and really all kosher bracha requires revius? What's the measurement? How do you measure it? So I remember Yitzchak, he says kasta, which was a measurement that they used to sell the fish fats with. So that measurement, the marisa of the fish fats, the havah b'tzibur that was in Tzipori, he havas came in luga de mekacha. So basically they're telling you in Talmudic times, there was a certain measuring cup that everyone had. That measuring cup that they used to sell fish fats, which was in Tzipori, the havas came in luga de mekacha. That has the amount of a lug that you make kiddush on, meaning it's with that you measure the revius of Pesach, meaning what you would do is, you would fill up that measuring tool of fish fats. I hope you cleaned it out well before you did that, but you would fill it up, and you would divide it into 4 different cups equally, because a leg is 4 revius, and that fish fat vessel had a leg, so you split it up into 4 parts. Now you're going to have a revius of leg for each $8 case. What?
It's the Migdash.
Oh, the mikdash. Yeah, like that of the mikdash, right? No, because actually there is a discussion regarding what it was like. They go through with Rashi. There's different interpretations. Is revius a loig or revius is because a loig is also revius of a kab. But that's the loig of the mikdash. Now Amar B'Yechon, he says tamnaisa kadmaisa. He says that there's this measuring cup of tamnaisa. So there's the original one, David Tiveria. Havi Yisrael da. That's more than the tamnaisa that we have now. River by a quarter. Meaning, they always switch the newer design. They say it's better the ovens, the better the old fridge. The new stuff sometimes they don't work as well. So the old tamnaisa was a quarter of a leg bigger than the new tamnaisa, which is a certain type of measuring tool that they had. So that's how they used to measure the revius for the Seder night. I mean, they used to fill up the old one and they would pour it into the new one till it's full, and the remaining wine from the old one is a revius, because that one is a quarter of a leg more than the current one. But now the Gemara tells us a classic way of defining the measurement of revius. Amar Chizder says revius shel Torah, which is well known machlokes, how much is revius, chazanish, Moshe, Chaim Noah, exactly what the shiur are. But a revius from biblical law, for example, the revius of wine of a nazir, which Allah Sinai, the Gemara brings the sukkah, that it's forbidden for him to drink, and revius adam that he'll get lashed. Revius adam that comes with 2 mason, which are linen from a pasuk, that is also going to be with of oil, or like revius of oil that they would use for the wafers of the nazir, which the Gemara learns out from Sukkah Menachos. So what we're coming to define over here is what's called volume, the measurement, the space of the vessel. That is going to be a revius if it's ba'ayim. If you have 2 finger breadth in length. Aletz ba'ayim on 2 finger breadth width, basically means to say 2 finger breadths squared. B'roimetz ba'ayim on a height of 2 finger breadths, v'chatzi as ba'en a half a finger breadth, v'chaimish as ba'en a fifth of a finger breadth. That is the volume of a revius. Now, how do we know this? We know this from the measurements of the mikvah. Because it's not like learn the brisa. Pasuk Vayikra says that if a person is going to be tamei because he had shechva zera, so the halacha is v'rochatz b'mayim is called basari. He should wash his flesh in the water. Now, what this means is it's not supposed to be anything between his skin and the water, meaning your flesh has to go into the water. Now, this one says b'mayim, in the water. It means b'mei mikveh, in the waters of the mikveh, meaning waters that were designated, that were gathered initially to be like this, because it doesn't say b'mayim. It rather says b'mayim, means the water, to exclude drawn water, which if let's say you bring it right now and you're typing, that wouldn't be sufficient. It has to be that the water was gathered by itself. Now this time it says as kol basari, his whole flesh. Now why say as kol? Why don't you just say basari? Comes to tell you, mine should kol gufa oilman. Has to be water that his whole body could go into, which it won't be seen. Rather, all his body will be covered by the water. But kama hain, and how much water is that? As you can think of in days, it's amma al amma. It's an amma squared, which Taisus explains that a person with his garments takes up an amma squared, which is basically around 2 feet squared. As the Gemara says in Eruvin, the place of a person is an amma. Now, although the Gemara Bava Basra, when it's talking about the kuchen, which is the catacombs, which is regarding they would bury them in these in the ground in some cave, it sounds like that actually the catacomb was an amma with the walls of the coffin. So obviously the person's body is not an amma. So Taisa explains by the mikvah you need to have it to be an amma. Why? Because the guy's not like a dead person. They're just putting him into some casket and just burying him. He's got to have room with his arms because it's not attached to his body. So that's what he's saying. A person is an amma squared. A person himself is, depending obviously how big you are on either side, but a person is around 2 feet squared. Beroim sholosh amas, with a height of 3 amas, which is approximately around, let's say, 6 feet. Now, Taisa says, the person's height is 3 amas without his head, which actually can't depend, because 6 is actually the largest share. So I'm over 6 feet, so obviously, right? But say you have people that the shiurim of an amma to feet, many hold it's even less than that. So Taisa says, what do you mean? So 3 amas is not enough. 3 amas would be out without the head, and actually that's why by the catacomb, by the kuchen, it says the length has to be 4 amas because of the head and the thickness of the walls of the coffin. So Taisa explains that by a mikveh it's enough with a height of 3 amas, because when you table, what happens is that the water, when you submerge it in the water elevates, it gets lifted up. Which Taisa says must be a tumah that the mikveh itself, the walls go higher than where the level of the water is, because if not, if it's exactly to the top, you go in, all the water goes over, spills over, you're not going to have your memsah of water. And actually, it brings from the Targum of the Megillah, which says, it says when they were hanging them, they each were a height of 3 amas. It means because they hung them when they were already beheaded. So therefore, that was a height of 3 amas. But you're right, a person is only 3 amas without his head. With his head is 4 amas. But so why make around 3 amas? Because when you put yourself in the water goes over, even if you're really taller than that. But even as a may, it's going to be an amma al amma, b'reim sholish amas. That's how much the mikveh has to have for a person to title in. Now, the shiur chachamim shemei mikveh, and the chacham evaluate how much is the measure of water in the mikveh. It's arba'in saw, it's 40 saw, and from that's where we learn out to the revius of biblical law. Now, the Rashbam goes through as classic. So we all learned in textbooks in school that we had these books showing you with the bars, which how do you add up and show you the mathematical equations. But we're going to do it. We're going to explain the way Rabbeinu Chananel explains it, which is going to be simpler for our brains to understand. Rabbeinu Chananel explains like this: how do you see from the memsah of the mikvah, which we're comparing the amount of water to the volume regarding how much space it took up? How do you see that a revius is going to be an amal amma b'rum etzba'ayim b'chamish etzba? How are you going to see that? So it's like this: 3 cubic amas. The Gemara is telling us, that's what the height of a person is. 3 cubic amas by amma squared is going to be 40 sa. Now that's going to come out to tell us is going to be 2 by 2 by 2.7 revius. How do you see that? How do you see that chesed? Like this: amma is how many tvachim? Amma is basically it's really from your elbow to the end of your finger. That's an amma, which is 6 tvachim. So that's amma is your arm, which a tefach is a handbreadth. How much is a tefach? A tefach depends on what type of tefach, but a tefach is 4 finger breadth. So it's 4 etzba'ayim. Now that comes out of amma, means to say that it's 24 finger breadth. If an amma is 6 tvachim and the tefach is 4 etzba'ayim, it comes out of an amma is 24 finger breadth. Now, a sa, so that's regarding the volume of the mikveh. A sa, which is the amount of water, is, we know askelav gudu. Askelav gudu, aleph, samach, kuf, lamed, that tells you, with gudu, tells you how much each one is equal. So, a sa is 6 kav. A kav is 4 lug, and a lug is 4 revius. So it comes out that a sa is 96 revius. So it comes out that 40 sa is 3,840 revius. Now, the mikvah is, like we said, 1 by 1 by 3 amas, which is 24 by 24 by 72 etzbois. So it comes out that 40 sa is 3,840 revius. So what you do is like this: you take the etzbois, which are 24 by 24 by 72. That comes out to be 41,472. You divide it by the amount of revius that are there, which we said is 3,840, you come out to 10.8 for every revius. How much is that? That's 2 by 2 by 2.7. That's boys. That's how much is 1 revius. That's how you see from the 40 sa of the mikvah. That's how you see the shiur of revius is going to be 1 by 1 by 2 by 2 by 2.7. That's boys for the shiur of revius. But be that as it may, the Gemara continues and says, Amar Vashi says, Amali Rabbi Machilei said Shulchan Shal Mikdash. The shulchan that was in the Beis HaMikdash, which was the golden shulchan that Moshe Rabbeinu made, which it says in the Torah in Shmos Chafei, it was 2 am in length, and it was an am in the width, and it was an am and a half in the height. So must have been shel parakim. It must have been that you could split. It was like, you have the leaf in the table, then you could separate, you could take away the width of the table and you split into 2, and the legs of the table, and they weren't finally attached, and you could detach it. How do you know this? Because the Isaac that they give you things say there was attached finally, and you cannot detach the width of the shulchan. So how can you go ahead and tell you something that was an amma wide in the mikveh that was an amma wide? Because the Torah tells me that the shulchan was an amma wide, and you just told me a second ago that a mikveh is an amma wide by an amma length. And there was a mikveh that was an amma there in the Azara, as they were teaching Yuma, or actually it's referring to what's called the Amma Shamayim. I always mention the Amma Shamayim, the stream that ran through the Azara, where they used to table the klisharis that became tummy, though it was a width Amma. That's why they called it an Amma. As the Mishnah teaches in Yuma, that they would mix in the Amma. So obviously you would be able to take apart the shulchan, unless how are you going to table it? Says the Gemara, what do you mean? My kusha, what's the difficulty? And the shulchan could be mekabatum, like Gemara says chagiga, where that's what it says hashulchan atar. Obviously it could become tummy. Says the Gemara, no, Dilma b'yam shas Shloima have not told. Maybe it was tabled in this pool that Shloima Melech made. The Torah of Chia, Yam shas Shloima, the pool that Shloima Melech made. Machzik nevach hamish mikvatar. It contained 150 kosher mikvahs. As the Gemara even learns out on Daf Yidal Manal, how you know that? But al kaponim, it doesn't have to be that it was detached. That you could take away, you could split up the shluchot. It could be not, and it was very obviously big. It was big enough to fit into the mikveh that Shlomo Melech made. Now the Gemara says to finish off the daf, Heichem Esakin Rabbanan meaning going back to the Daled Kaiser. How did Rabbanan institute something, the 4 cups of wine, which appears the asab of the Yisakon that can bring to danger? Because as the Rashbam points out, even according to the Mandama later on, that says that which when there's a number 4, there's no concern about peers, is only concerned with 2. But regarding sorcery, kishiv, there is a concern, as the Gemara is going to tell us later on. So be that as may, either one, whether it be because of shadim, whether mazikin, or because of kishiv, there's a concern about doing things in peers. Hajjaban b'masak, telling that's a concern about peers. But tiny when the brayso lo yochel on the tray, a person should not eat 2s, meaning peers, 2, 4, 6, 8. Or halacha, we don't follow this, but in Talmud times we're very concerned with this. Well, Yishta tray shouldn't bring peers. It shouldn't drink peers of 2. Well, the Kanech tray shouldn't wipe himself with 2s. Well, he has to trachim true. He shouldn't do his needs, meaning marital intimacy, in 2s. So how could they make peers of 2s by having the Daled cases? The Gemara has 3 answers to this question. It says in the pasuk that Leil Shimurim, as the pasuk says, it's a night of watching for me. The night I took you out of Egypt, this night. Which Leila Meshuma Boma Mazikin, this is a night that's protected from Mazikin, from harmful spirits, and they were not concerned about the harmful Mazikin or any type of danger. That's why we don't say all the psukim when we go to sleep by the Seder night. We only say Shema, we don't say all those V'hinayim, we don't say Yesh B'Seis, we don't say it because we're not concerned about Mazikin that night. Another approach, Rav Ami says, Kaishal Bracha, when you have a cup of Bracha, meaning the Birchas HaMazal, which is the 3rd cup of wine, that is only Mitzvah L'Tayva, that will only combine for the good, but it will not combine for the bad to complete the number 4 to be a peer for danger if you're going to drink the 4th one after that. As Gemara is going to tell us later on, we know this from V'yishmerecha. By Birchas Kainim, the 3rd thing is V'yishmerecha. The 3rd is only there to protect you, not to be for that. If it's not going to combine for number 4 when it's a koshel bracha. Or a 3rd approach, Rav Yinam, it says, Arba koset tikin Rabbanan derech. No, the Rabbanan instituted 4 cups of wine as ways of freedom by the Seder night. Each and every one of them, continues to is mitzvah b'nafshu. It's its own individual mitzvah, and they don't combine. It's not like it's not 4. It's not a peer of 4. Each one is its own thing, and therefore it's 1 and 1 and 1 and 1 and 1. And therefore it's not combining, and therefore that's the 3rd approach why it's not a problem. Now the Gemara finishes off by saying, "You told me leyasat shachar trei that you shouldn't have marital intimacy in peers," but it says Gemara, "Amai, why? The first time you had marital intimacy, you already finished the cohabitation, and you already lost your desire. So nimluchu, it's changing your mind. Meaning, you can't say it's peers as if we were going to do marital intimacy 2 times in a row because it doesn't combine. It's not like it doesn't go in peers. Once someone has intimacy, he's already done. He doesn't want to think about this. It happens again an hour later. So fine, but that's not. You can't say it combines. Says the Imam Abai says you're helping. This is what the Gemara is saying. Lo yochel trei, don't eat in peers of 2s. Don't have those 2 cookies or whatever it is. V'yishta trei, drink 2 cups. And don't do your marital intimacy afil pam achas, even 1 time. In other words, if someone ate in peers, you got to be careful not to have marital intimacy after that, even for a long time, which we are machmir with these things. Which, let's say, going to the basic kisei or certain things, the Gemara they brought in halacha and shulchan aruch not to have marital intimacy because the mazikin that are there. Here also in the Talmudic times when they were concerned for peers, they're saying even 1 time now don't have marital intimacy. Because Dimacholosh, you might be weakened because of the marital intimacy, and since you had taken peers, umistra, it might cause a problem to a person's muzzle. So that's what it's saying. But of course, it's not. You can't do tashmish as peers because they're done in singular elements. So it rather means to say, if you had zugas, be very careful after that about having marital intimacy because that's making you weak, and you did something that also weakens you in a spiritual sense. Something to discuss in today's Daf Pesachim Daf Kuf Tas was you have to make your family happy on the Yom Tov. Now, how do you do that? So it's machlek is either you do it with wine, or everyone according to what they like. Men with wine, women in bubble with colorful garments, in Eretz Yisrael with that of the fine pressed linen garments. In times of Beis Hamikdash it was with meat, in today's times it's with wine. Now, what's the shiur of the revius? The Gemara said in Talmudic times they had this measuring tool for the fats, for the fish fats, which was a life of the mikdash. So they would you do that divided by 4, you'll know what the revius. Or they had this original tamnais and the new tamnais, and the difference between that was a revius, and you make that discrepancy you could use. Or for old times, the volume you could say is if you take something that's 2 finger breadth, but 2 finger breadth by a height of 2 finger breadth and a half and a fifth, which is 2.7, that amount by squared by 2 a finger breath is going to give you the share of revius. How do we know that? Because you know from 40 saw in the mikvah, which is the Amar, Gimel Amas, and you take that, you divide it, as we went through the cheshbon with the Rebbeinu Chananel, you'll see that a revius is going to come out to that measurement of etzba'im, and then you'll know how much is revius for the Seder night. And we said it's not a right that the shulchan of the Bezmikdash was made out of parts. To be able to table in the mikvah, it only has to be an amma, because you could say they table in the Yam Shal Asher Shleima. The 4 cups of wine, we said there's no concern about a danger about sugas, and even to have tashmish, we said after sugas is concerned. We said no, because it's a little shimurim, or because keshel bracha is only going to go combined only for the good, or because every single cup was its own independent mitzvah, and it wasn't being done in Pirush Neged to any time.